Technology, in common with many other activities, tends towards avoidance of risks by investors. Certainty is ruled out if possible. Capital investments follow this rule. Hence, people generally prefer the predictable. Few recognize how destructive this can be, how it imposes severe limits on variability, and thus makes whole populations fatally vulnerable to the shocking ways our universe can throw the dice. Assessment of Ix, Bene Gesserit Archives. On the morning after that initial test in the desert, Shana awoke in the priestly complex to find her bed surrounded by white-robed people. Priests and priestesses. "She's awake," a priestess said. Fear gripped Shana. She clutched the bed covers close to her chin while she stared out at those intent faces. Were they going to abandon her in the desert again? She had slept the sleep of exhaustion in the softest bed with the cleanest linen she had ever experienced in her 8 years, but she knew everything the priests did could have a double meaning. They were not to be trusted. "Did you sleep well?" It was the priestess who had spoken first. She was a gray-haired older woman, her face framed in a white cowl with purple trim. The old eyes were watery but alert, pale blue. The nose was an upturned stub above a narrow mouth and adjusting chin, an out-jutting chin. "Will you speak to us?" the woman persisted. "I am Kanya, your night attendant. Remember, I helped you into your bed." At least, the tone of voice was reassuring. Shana sat up and took a better look at these people. They were afraid. A desert child's nose could detect the telltale pheromones. To Shana, it was a simple, straightforward observation. That smell equals fear. "You thought you would hurt me," she said. "Why did you do that?" The people around her exchanged looks of consternation. Shiana's fear dissipated. She had sensed the new order of things, and yesterday's trial in the desert meant more change. She recalled how subservient the older woman, Kanya, she had been almost groveling the previous night. Shana would learn in time that any person who fears, or any person who lives through the decision to die, evolved a new emotional balance. Fears were transitory. This new condition was interesting. Kanya's voice trembled when she responded. "Truly, child of God, we did not intend harm." Shana straightened the bed covers in her lap. "My name is Shana." That was desert politeness. Kanya already had produced a name. "Who are these others?" "They will be sent away if you don't want them, Shana." Kanya indicated a florid-faced woman at her left, dressed in a robe similar to her own. "I'll accept Alasa, of course. She is your day attendant." Alasa curtsied at the introduction. Shana stared up at the puffy face with water fat, heavy features, and a nimbus of fluffy blonde hair. Shifting her attention abruptly, Shana looked at the men in the group. They watched her with heavy-lidded intentness, some with looks of trembling suspicion. The fear smell was strong. "Priests." "Send them away." Shana waved a hand at the priests. "They are haram." It was the gutter word, the lowest term of all for that which was most evil. The priests recoiled in shock. "Begone!" Kanya commanded. There was no mistaking the look of malevolent glee on her face. Kanya had not been included among the vile ones, but these priests clearly stood among those labeled as haram. They must have done something hideous for God to send a child priestess to chastise them. Kanya could believe it of priests. They had seldom treated her the way she deserved. Like chastened bedogs, the priests bowed themselves backwards and left Shiana's chamber. Among those who went out in the hallway was a historian locutor named Drummond, a dark man with a busy mind that tended to fasten onto ideas like the beak of a carrion bird onto a morsel of meat. When the chamber door closed behind them, Drummond told his trembling companions that the name Shana was a modern form of the ancient name Siona. "You all know of Siona's place in the histories," he said. "She served Shai-Hulud in his transformation from human shape into the divided god." Styros, a wrinkly older priest with dark lips and pale, glistening eyes, looked wonderingly at Drummond. "That is extremely curious," Styros said. "The oral histories claim that Siona was instrumental in his translation from the one into the many. Shiana, do you think—" "Let us not forget the Hadi Benotto translation of God's own holy words," another priest interrupted. "Shai-Hulud referenced many times to Siona." "Not always with favor," Styros reminded them. "Remember her full name, Siona ibn Fuad al-Seafa Atreides." "Atreides," another priest whispered. "We must study her with care," Drummond said. A young acolyte messenger hurried up the hallway to the group and sought among them until he spied Styros. "Styros," the messenger said, "you must clear this hallway immediately." "Why?" It was an indignant voice from the press of the rejected priests. "She is to be moved into the high priest's quarters," the messenger said. "By whose orders?" Styros demanded. "The high priest Tuek himself says this," the messenger said. "They have been listening." He waved a hand vaguely towards the direction from which he had come. All of the group in the hall understood. Rooms could be shaped to send voices from them into other places. There were always listeners. "What have they heard?" Styros demanded. His old voice quavered. "She asks if her quarters were the best. They are about to move her, and she must not find any of you out here. "But what are we to do?" Styros asked. "Study her," Drummond said. The hall was cleared immediately, and all of them began the process of studying Shiana. The pattern born here would print itself on all their lives over the subsequent years. The routine that took shape around Shiana produced changes felt in the farthest reaches of the divided god's influence. 2 words ignited the change. Study her. How naive she was, the priests thought. How curiously naive. But she could read, and she displayed an intense interest in the holy book she found in Tuek's quarters. Her quarters now. All was propitiation from the highest to the lowest. Tuek moved into the quarters of his chief assistant, and the bumping process moved downwards. Fabricators waited upon Shiana and measured her. The finest stillsuit was fashioned for her. She acquired new robes of priestly gold and white with purple trim. People began avoiding historier locutor Drummond. He put to bentonholing his fellows and expounding the history of the original Siona as though this said something important about the present bearer of the ancient name. Siona was the mate of the holy Duncan Idaho, Drummond reminded anyone who would listen. Their descendants are everywhere. Indeed? Pardon me for not listening further, but I am really on an urgent errand. At first, Tuek was more patient with Drummond. The history was interesting and its lessons obvious. God has sent us a new Siona, Tuek said. All should be clear. Drummond went away and returned with more tidbits from the past. The accounts from Dar es Balat take on new meaning now, Drummond told his high priest. Should we not make further tests and comparisons of this child? Drummond had braced the high priest immediately after breakfast. The remains of Tuek's meal still occupied the serving table on the balcony. Through the open window, they could hear stirrings overheard in Shiana's quarters. Tuek put a cautioning finger to his lips and spoke in a hushed voice. The Holy Child goes of her own choice to the desert. He went to a wall map and pointed to an area southwest of Keen. Apparently this is an area that interests her, or, I should say, calls her. I am told she makes frequent use of dictionaries, Droman said. Surely that cannot be a... She is testing us, Tuek said. Do not be fooled. But Lord Tuek, she asks the most childish questions of Kanya and Alosa. Do you question my judgment, Dromund? Belatedly, Dromund realized he had overstepped the proper bounds. He fell silent, but his expression said many more words were compressed within him. God has sent her to weed out some evil that has crept into the ranks of the anointed. Anointed, Tuek said. Go, pray and ask yourself if that evil has lodged itself within you. When Dromund had gone, Tuek summoned a trusted aide. Where is the Holy Child? She has gone out into the desert, Lord, to commune with her father. To the southwest? Yes, Lord. Dromund must be taken far out to the east and left on the sand. Plant several thumpers to make sure he never returns. Dromund, Lord. Dromund. Even after Dromund was translated into the mouth of God, the priests continued to follow his original injunction. They studied Shana. Shana also studied. Gradually, so gradually that she could not identify the point of transition, she recognized her great power over those around her. At first it was a game, a continual children's play with adults jumping to obey each childish whim. But it appeared that no whim was too difficult. Did she require a rare fruit on her table? The fruit was served to her on a golden dish. Did she glimpse a child far away or far below on the teeming streets and require that child as a playmate? The child was hustled up to Shiana's temple quarters. When fear and shock passed, the child might even join in some game, which the priests and priestesses observed intently. Innocent skipping about the rooftop garden, giggling whispers, all were subjected to intense analysis. Shiana found the awe of such children a burden. She seldom called the same child back to her, preferring to learn new things from new playmates. The priests achieved no consensus about the innocence of such encounters. The playmates were put through fearful interrogation until Shiana discovered this and raged at her guardians. Inevitably, word of Shiana spread through Rakkus and off-planet. The Sisterhood's reports accumulated. The years passed in a kind of sublimely autocratic routine, feeding Shiana's curiosity. It was a curiosity that appeared to have no limits. None of those among the immediate attendants, thought of this as education. Shiana teaching the priests of Rakkus as they teaching her. The Bene Gesserit, however, observed this aspect of Shiana's life at once and watched it closely. She is in good hands. Leave her there until she is ready for us, Taraza ordered. Keep a defense force on constant alert and see that I get regular reports. Not once did Shiana reveal her true origins, nor what Shaitan had done to her family and neighbors. That was a private thing between Shaitan and herself. She thought of her silence as payment for having been spared. Some things paled for Shiana. She made fewer trips into the desert. Curiosity continued, but it became obvious that an explanation of Shaitan's behavior toward her might not be found on the open sand. And although she knew there were embassies of other powers on Rakkus, the Bene Gesserit spies among her attendants made sure that Shiana did not express too much interest in the Sisterhood. Soothing answers to dampen such interest were provided and metered out to Shiana as required. The message from Taraza to her observers on Rakkus was direct and pointed. The generations of preparation have become the years of refinement. We will move only at the proper moment. There is no longer any doubt that this child is the one.